Every day, the world moves on as it always has. Cities wake up, work begins, and life feels familiar. But beneath that sense of normality, something is shifting. The climate is changing, and the systems we rely on, energy, food, water, cities, finance, are under pressure in ways we're only beginning to understand. These changes don't live in reports or projections, they are already shaping people, livelihoods, and communities. We created the Climate Leadership Podcast so these challenges don't remain abstract or distant, but are explored through the people working inside these systems, making real decisions with real consequences, often without clear answers. This is not a space for fear, blame, or perfection. It's a space for honest conversations about what leadership looks like in a changing world. If you're listening, you're already part of that leadership. Let's begin the conversation.
Welcome to another episode of the Climate Leadership Podcast. In today's episode, we are exploring one of the most powerful yet often overlooked levers for addressing climate change, the global food system. Food sits at the intersection of climate, biodiversity, health, and economic systems. The way we produce, distribute, and consume food has enormous implications for greenhouse gas emissions, land use, water resources, and ecosystem health. In fact, global food systems are responsible for roughly a third of global emissions, making dietary choices and agriculture practices a critical part of the climate conversation. To unpack this complex but incredibly important topic, I am delighted to welcome Mr. Mike Parry. Mike is the co-founder of the Planeatry Alliance and a well-known sustainable business commentator. He previously served as the director of sustainable business at Marks & Spencer, where he helped shape one of the most influential corporate sustainability strategies in the retail sector. Today, Mike works with businesses, startups, and policymakers to help accelerate the transition to a more sustainable economy. Through his work, he focuses on leadership, transforming incumbent businesses, supporting sustainable startups, and scaling solutions that create meaningful impact for people and the planet. In this conversation, we will explore why transforming the global food system is essential for climate action, how shifting diets can contribute to environmental and health outcomes, and what role businesses, consumers, and policymakers must play to drive this change. Thank you, Mike, for giving us your time today and joining me in this podcast.
Amber, delighted to join you.
So before I get into the questions, if I may ask you, can you share a bit about your journey, your professional journey in sustainability?
Sure. So, I started work in a different century, working on the water system. And obviously the water system is integral to the food system we're going to talk about in a minute, but that's where my life started. Joined Marks & Spencer in the year 2000, the UK retailer, and found a massive opportunity there in a business that cared passionately about these issues, but didn't have it quite joined up in the way that it could. Worked with a number of good colleagues to create Plan A, 100-point plan to drive the business forward socially, environmentally. Made lots of difference to the business, to its customers, to its supply chains as well. And I learned a lot about practical change in the food system from that job, which we'll talk about in a moment. More recently, I've been working as an advisor to many different businesses across the world on sustainability. And crucial in the last 12 months, started Planeatry Alliance with my amazing co-founder, Ali Morpeth, a brilliant nutritionist. I have a sustainability background. We've brought that world together. Food that's good for the planet is also good for the human health and vice versa. So that's at the heart of my journey. Really enjoyed all of it. I've got a bit of grey hair getting here, but I've never had a boring day in my working career.
Wonderful, Mike. Nice. Very, very, very nice to have you with me today. So the global food system contributes significantly to greenhouse gas emission, biodiversity loss, and land degradation. From your perspective, why is food such a central but often under-discussed part of climate conversation?
It's such a good question, Amber. And I think it's because, unlike the two other industrial sectors that have started their sustainability or climate transformation, the power system and the car system, it doesn't have a neat beginning or endpoints. So we'll talk about cars, we can say diesel, electric. We talk about the power system, we can say fossil fuels, renewables. Most people would understand where you're starting from and where you need to get to. The journey from one to the other, very, very complicated. What we've struggled with is to articulate all that is wrong with today's food system and all that we need to do to change it to be a better system in the future. And that's because it's not just climate, as you've already said. It's about nature loss, it's about plastic pollution, pesticide pollution, too much use of fertilizer, nitrogen and phosphorus, deforestation, land use loss, plus justice issues, the impact of producing food on hundreds of millions of smallholders and farmers around the world, most of whom carry a lot of risk, but not a lot of sort of upside and benefit in terms of their hard work. And then the third dimension, the food system, health and well-being, the impact of the diets that we eat on billions of people, and the impact that's having on health systems around the world and paying for them as well. So that's been the real challenge. Where we're coming from, where we're going to. Now what we're beginning to understand, in part because of the very good work done by the Eat Lancet Commission in 2025 last year, it really started to articulate very clearly the problem and a lot of the solution. And I think the solution in very, very, very simple terms boils down to two things. One is very much more resilient production of food ingredients, whether on farms or commodity production. Let's just say regenerative agriculture as a shorthand. The other end of the system is helping people make better choices around the diets that they eat. Some of it is about restricting bad things, but a lot of it is about helping people choose better food for them and for the wider planet. And we'll unpack that as we go through the conversation.
Sure. So, Mike, you were mentioning about take an example of electric vehicle, which is from diesel vehicle to electric vehicle. We see a lot more financial incentives there, and it's a top-down approach. But changing food habits for each human being is from bottom-top kind of an approach. Do you think it plays it's more difficult to change people's habit rather than pushing down from top?
Yeah, and again, it's such an important comparison between the car system and the food system, for example. I mean, vehicles, if we're lucky enough to be able to afford a vehicle, we might change every 3, 4, 5 years. Food and drink, we think about every day. Some people think about it too much. Many people don't have enough, think about it a lot, but can't get the food that they need. But somebody in the Western food marketplace might think about food in some shape or form 100 times a day. Okay. So suddenly we've got food is really here and now. It's existential to our life and our health. And it's complicated. Amber, if you walk into a large UK supermarket in the Western world, you'll find 20, 30, 40,000 different individual products on those shelves. You've got 20 minutes to do the shop, you've got a tight budget, you're rushing to get somewhere else. And suddenly I'm asking you to look at lots of different labels about salts, fat, sugars, carbon, water, human rights, and make better choices. And that is impossible. So why I say that the second big part of the solution to a better food system is the food environment, the place where we make choices. So this is not the natural environment, this is the artificial environment, which is shaped by the price that we charge for food, how we promote it, how we market it, how we use loyalty points to reward people, how influencers shape what we do, talking about food online. This food environment is at the moment working against people. It's making life too complicated, too noisy. We have to simplify that by taking away some bad choices, not many, but some, bringing clearer ways of making decisions, which we'll talk about a little later, particularly algorithmically, and inspiring people. This can be a really negative story if we're not careful. Quite the opposite. This is a really exciting journey to eat better, exciting food and diet for all of us.
Right. Mike, I was just thinking there's a funny video, on the internet where an old guy in Germany, he's talking to someone. He said, 10 years back, I just threw my rubbish in one bin. Now I need to have an Excel sheet to know where to throw what.
Yeah, and he's not wrong. So you can say all people never like to change. Well, I do, but not many do. But actually, it's not about saying to people, it's all on you. We're big foods, we're big government, but we're going to place all the cost and all the complexity and effort on you to make better choices. That's crazy.
Mhm.
80 or 90% of a better food system is dependent upon big food and big government shaping and supporting people to make better choices, not just leaving it to people to walk through that superstore of tens of thousands of products and try and work it out. That's impossible.
Right. So, through your work with the Planetary Alliance, you emphasize the importance of diet change. What does a sustainable diet actually look like in practice, and why is it so important for climate and planetary health?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Amber, because I've been working in the space for 30 years, and most of the work that I've been involved with has been about food production. It's been at factories, farms, commodity sources, fisheries, working hard with a small number of good people to improve the environmental and social impact of those production systems. That work is vital. It will never, ever stop being vital. But we also now need to create a demand pull for better production. Because at the moment, if I just say to a farmer or factory owner, invest $50,000 or $100,000 or $1 million in better production, they'll turn around and say, Mike, okay, who's going to pay for that? Will you pay for it? Will the consumer pay for it? Will the government pay for it? Because if no one's willing to pay for it, it ain't going to happen. And that's the right answer. So we have to find a way of building a better business case for action. The ultimate business case for action is because the marketplace demands better food that's healthier, better for the environment, better for producers as well. Now, we've been trying to do that for 10, 20, 30 years. Good schemes like organic food, fair trade food have been there to give people choices. In big, busy supermarkets, you can find an organic aisle or fair trade aisle. And that's been brilliant, but it's not scaled. It's remained 2, 3, 4% of the marketplace, often because of a price premium. Mm-hmm. And we need to get to a point where all food is being produced to higher standards, and all producers of that food feel incentivized to produce it to higher standards, because that's what the marketplace needs. So my first point is that we have to create demand for better food, either through personal choice or because big food businesses and the policy system are demanding that better production standards are used as well. So that's why, to me, creating a demand for better food is so vital. If we just leave it to producers, it will remain a relatively second or third order priority, particularly in the world we live in now with so much going on, war, conflict, politics around us. We need that demand signal.
Right. So, Mike, I was talking to someone and he told me, or he shared with me that, like, I asked the question why organic food is more expensive than the normal food. He said, why don't we put extra tax on the normal food and make it as expensive as the organic food, because they are creating emissions which are bad for the environment.
And Amber, that is absolutely the logical question, because again, as the Lancet report said, the global food system turns over about $10 trillion a year. It causes $15 trillion of damage every year in doing that. And by damage, I mean particularly the impact on healthcare systems, because if people are consuming bad diets, they're not as productive as they could be. They might be out of the workforce and need to be supported by welfare benefits. It's about the impact on farmers and their lives, and it's about the impact on the environment as well. But this is an industry, a sector on a global scale that's destroying value. So why is it being subsidized? I mean, every year, taxpayers around the world put $800 billion of subsidies into farming systems, most of which are pointing us towards unsustainable practice rather than sustainable. So the challenge of the person you were talking to about just charge a proper cost, a true cost for non-organic food is the right question. However, what political leaders would say back to us is, nice theory, if that increases the price of food as we know it today by 10, 20, 30%, people don't have that money.
Yeah.
So suddenly you've got this challenge of, that's the theory of what should happen. The political reality is it won't. But for the first time, we're beginning to understand the negative impact economically of the food system and why we need to find smart ways to transform it.
Right. It's really interesting, Mike, that in the last 10, 20 years, we promoted a shift towards unsustainable food, and now we are asking the question, oh, why are we not growing our own food in the garden,
Yeah, and again, I don't think we're always going to have a big food system. I think, as much as I will do things in my own garden, I've got good friends do. We're middle class, we have a garden, we can compost, we can sort of grow a little bit of our own food. Most people don't have that opportunity. And I do think we need to support alternative food systems, whether it's farmers markets, that farmers selling direct to consumers, cutting out big food in the middle, that's extracting value from their hard work. We need that. But I don't think it will ever be a significant volume part of the food system that's going to have to feed in the future 9.5 billion people.
Right.
Okay, we can be inspired by it, we can support it, but we also need big food to change as well.
Right. Okay, so one of the challenges is that food is deeply connected to culture, affordability, and accessibility. How can we encourage dietary shift without making sustainability feel restrictive or elitist?
Such a good question. And again, let's go to one of the great debates of now and into the future, the role of livestock-based protein in a diet. And again, you asked me what is a healthy diet. I think for a healthy and sustainable diet, I think for a lot of people, it is less livestock-based protein than they consume today. But when I say that, I don't mean that most people need to become vegan or vegetarian. So the future is predominantly about something called flexitarianism. It's about finding different ways to reduce the livestock-based protein that you eat. When you do eat livestock-based protein, big food has got to find dramatically different ways of producing it with less impact on the animal, in terms of how they're reared, in terms of the environment, and obviously rewards for farmers who produce the protein as well. So we have to be very careful about language. This is not about banning or stopping, it's about giving people better choices. And that requires plant-based alternatives to be both price comparative with the livestock industry, exciting, delicious things that people want to eat. Now, we know from experience that does not happen overnight. And again, I go back to this word food environment. We've got to help people make different choices. So help people go from where they are to where they need to get to. And that require lots of joined up thinking in terms of pricing, promotion, inspiration of the meals that you can eat, etc. So the totality of the space in which we make choices has got to be aligned with that shift. And there is one more dimension to it, which is critically important. This is about helping farmers manage this transition. So many farmers from many communities around the world might be negatively impacted. How do we support them? And that's where we've really got to think through carefully. And too little thought has gone into at the moment, which is making understandable a lot of farmers resistant to change. So we've got to think carefully, but let's be really clear. This is about a livestock containing diet, just a bit less than we have today.
Okay, so Mike, at Imperial, we have started a new initiative where if I buy a vegan meal instead of a chicken or something, they give me a pamphlet where I get stamps, and once I collect 5 stamps, I get a free meal. So this is like giving choices, right?
Yeah, and reward, and this is important when you're trying to change long-established behaviours, and our food behaviours are deeply held. They're emotionally held for a lot of people. When you ask people or invite people to make changes, you've got to give them reasons to change, to explore and try new approaches. And I would never sit here and say to people, eat food that you just don't like, you don't like the taste of, you think it's much more expensive than the food that you eat today. It is incumbent on big food businesses to find ways of supporting people in the transition. Now, we talk about this food environment. When you walk into a food environment to do your own shopping in a big supermarket, you're on your own. When you're at Imperial College, you're part of a controlled food environment where the caterers, and some very good catering companies out there start working in this space, are helping you make better choices in a controlled environment where you're interacting with one set of menus, one set of information, one approach to pricing and loyalty. That's a lot simpler. So again, when it comes to both private and public spaces, schools, hospitals, universities, where people buy food, it's sometimes easier to make the shift that you need to make.
Right. And I was just thinking that when I go to a grocery store to buy stuff, I already think about it before I leave my home, what I need to buy. So making a shift right there in the store is very difficult because I already made up my mind what I want to eat.
And Amber, I was reflecting on this recently. I had to run down to my local supermarket in the evening to top up on a few things. That store has probably got about 20,000 products in it. I went in 2 minutes to 5 products that I needed. I didn't look at 19,995 other products. I was mission driven to get the 5 I want. So to break us all out of those missions that we have today, those set way of working, is really hard, and it won't happen by accident. And a lot of the progress being made by leading retailers in this space. And there's been a really good benchmark just come out in Europe by an organization called Question Mark. And they've just looked at the 27 biggest food retailers, or publicly listed retailers 27 biggest food retailers in Europe. And they benchmarked them. And they found that a couple of retailers, Lidl and Ahold Delhaize, and its Albert Heijn business, are the leaders because they're finding ways to join the food environment up for their customer. Their product development, what price they charge for it, how they position it in the store, the inspiration they put into their marketing, their media, their communications, their magazines to encourage people to try new things. It's all joined up, and that's why they're leaders.
Right. Okay, so Mike, you spent many years leading sustainability initiatives at Marks and Spencer. What lessons did you learn from trying to transform a large incumbent company that could be applied to today's food system transformation?
Yeah, and let me offer you 2 answers to that. One is strategic, and that's saying that any big business now needs to answer 3 fundamental questions when it comes to social and environmental issues. The why, the what, the how. The why asks a really simple question. Why do you as a business need to become more sustainable? What's the business case for it? And again, what I learned at Marks and Spencer is that had to be framed very much around the consumer. So there's a good business case for becoming more efficient, particularly more resilient in the current world that we live in, which we can talk about in a moment. Motivating your people that they're working for a good business, attracting investors to you who see that you're managing these risks well. But the main driver for participation and shift in that business was the sense that it was reinforcing the word that matters most of all to Marks and Spencer customers: quality. Not just functional quality, packaging that leak in the food hall or in your kitchen, but this is food produced to high standards by farmers who've been well looked after, who look after the soil, look after the animal, look after nature. So I learned the importance of making it consumer centric. So why are you doing this? To deliver quality food to the consumer in a 21st century marketplace. The second question, the what do I commit to do to become healthier and more sustainable? These are your targets, these are your goals. This is a traditional sustainability plan. Net zero science-based targets, less deforestation, less water use, all the usual things you'd seen there. The crucial thing that underlies that now is data. I worked for a very, very small food business on a global scale. It still sold billions of items every year. And I was trying to improve all of that with a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet. It's the biggest one on the planet. With AI, with big data, with digital twins, you can start to do very different things about the digital footprint of the totality of that range and improve it. And the third thing is the how. How do I integrate sustainability into everybody's job in a business, not just the specialist role? So again, I learned at Marks and Spencer, I reported to the chief exec, I had a team of 10 people, out of 64,000 people at M&S, 10 people. And our job was not to buy apples or build stores better or run lorries in a more sustainable way. That was other people's job. Our job was to support them, inspire them, show the business case for action, help get them involved with partnerships across the sector that made it easier to do collectively rather than try to do it on your own. So we were coaches and mentors on an organizational level. So those to me are the crucial 3 questions: the why, the what, the how. and making sure the consumer's at the heart of it. And the final point, again, there's been a recurring theme through our conversation, not just making it customer-centric if you're a food business, but farmer-centric. And by farmer, I also mean smallholder as well for commodity production. Because big food businesses between you, the marketplace, and small producers can look after themselves by and large. You need to support them, of course, but they face the same business case, the same rationale for change that I do as the retailer. Farming and smallholding is not like that. And I do feel, and this is not just in the UK, but at the marketplaces, we need a very much more supportive subsidy system, which I've mentioned already. There's money out there, but it goes on bad things, not good things. And what we call an extension service. So in effect, farmers visiting other farmers to help them farm better. Not because a guy in a suit turns up and says you need to do it differently, but farmers are talking to farmers about improving practice as well. So that's some of the key learning I took from my years at M&S.
Right, Mike. So like when I visit my local grocery store, I see they have some tokens. They say, put this token, we'll help in sustainability. These are different kind of sustainability project, like helping community, stuff like that. But they don't talk about food system or changing food habits. I think that goes against their business model, right?
Well, yes and no. So I think retailers have an obligation to their customers as individuals, but collectively as the communities where they live. So again, I work for a small UK retailer. It was present in many hundreds of British communities, some big cities, some much smaller towns. And each of those stores did something local and relevant for their community. Now, some of that is food related. Surplus food donations at the end of the working day, helping bring people who have faced significant barriers to getting a job into the store to learn how to work in a shop, build a CV, get another job, etc. Could I ask a customer to walk into my store and put a token into better cocoa or better milk production or better palm oil production or better fish production? That's very complicated. And the consumer would probably say to me, but Mike, I pay you good money for that product. Surely some of that money is going back to do that anyway. So I do think that there's a separate thing about community engagement and a separate thing about funding change through your products and other approaches to drive systemic change back in supply chains.
Right. Reading that in France, they came up out, they finally released or made a law that these retailers or restaurants can't throw away their food. They can give it to the needy people.
Yeah. And what's happened in the UK, that's happened on largely a voluntary basis in the UK, which has been fairly good. But again, there've been some recent food scandals about UK retailers who are not donating food that they can't sell at the end of the day to local food banks. So you could argue that the voluntary approach in the UK needs some kind of legal underpinning. And I'm a great believer that you can't have a law, a micro law for everything to do with the food system. Nothing would happen. So the law that we actually need is about transparency of reporting. So if every big UK food business, retail and hospitality and wholesale, had to report on their surplus food each year and what they did with it, and explain why some of it didn't go to people who needed it, there might be a good reason. Transparency drives so many different behaviours, but you need one law for transparency, not 50 different laws for every other aspect of surplus food.
Right. Okay. So technology is also changing how we think about food, from alternative proteins to precision agriculture. What innovations do you believe have the greatest potential to accelerate sustainable food transitions? So
those are all production technologies, and they're all really important, and I'll touch on them briefly in a moment. But I think the most important technology intervention is to help people make better choices. So go back to my point about you walk into a supermarket, 20,000 choices, where do I start? Imagine if you could go online and order food. So you might, for your family, buy 50 products each week, and you put them in your basket, you're about to press pay on the button, and the algorithm says to you, Amber, do you want a high, medium, or low salt basket? Ooh, in terms of my health, maybe medium salt. The algorithm will then tell you in a split second, here are the 6 products, Amber, that are high in salt. Do you still want to buy them? And you might say 3 of them I really like, I'll keep, but 3 of them, show me alternatives.
Yeah.
The machine knows what you like to eat, offers you 3 alternatives that are much lower salt. So you've been able to buy a medium salt basket for you and your family with one click of a button. That is only possible when you've got a detailed digital passport for every unique product you sell, health profile, environmental profile, people profile, that allows you to set the parameters that matter most to you and your family, because you're different from me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the number one holy grail for me, is finding a way to enable people to easily make better choices rather than having to look at all these different products. The second thing is, and I think that's predominantly up or positive, the second thing I'm seeing, and does have many good points, but some sort of challenges as well, is this concept of food as a service or food as a medicine, where we're starting to see people think about food in terms of a diet that's good for me. But what about GLPs, Ozempic, Wegovy? What about personalized nutrition? What about tracking apps that track how many steps I take, my heartbeats? What about meal planners that allow me to sort of plan my food for the week going ahead? And all these different sort of technology innovations exist to do with health and well-being scattered in consumers' lives. And you could have on your phone 10 or 20 different apps to try and help you live be happier and healthier. Too complicated.
Yeah.
What I can start to see is people in the food industry bring all that together into one integrated package that helps you and your family work in all those parameters through one platform. Now, it might be food retail, it might be one of the existing technology companies, but all these different sectors, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, health insurance, foods, technology devices start to come together. That could be amazing. But lots of issues there to do with trust, with data, very personal data, the advice you give. So again, we've got to be very careful in that space. But technology will move into that world quite rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
People really want health solutions. And then you mentioned technologies back in supply chains. We need all of them. We need, remote sensing, drones. We need robotics. But we're also going to be looking at things like cultivated meat grown in a laboratory. And I know, again, Imperial has been working hard in this space as well.
Mm-hmm.
That has massive challenges to overcome in terms of cost, but I'm sure with time, over the next decade, they'll be solved. But they also have big challenges emotionally as well. How do people feel about meat that's been grown in a laboratory?
Yeah.
How do we feel about displacing, again, my point earlier, maybe displacing farmers from the land where they've raised animals, their families for hundreds of years? So lots of very emotional topics to work through as we apply some of these technologies.
Right, Mike. Yeah, it's not that easy. There's so many factors playing around. It's a very big challenge.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving forward, looking ahead to the next decade, what gives you the most optimism about the future of sustainable food systems, and where do you think the biggest challenges still lie?
Well, Amber, I'm going to give you a funny answer to this because I'm going to go backwards to go forwards. So I'm going to start very briefly with a challenge. I think the good thing now is that we're beginning to understand the sheer challenge that the global food system's got. We're talking about a food system that's turning over $10 trillion a year, causing $15 trillion of damage each year. That's not theoretical damage, that's real world consequences. So the UK, the impact of poor diet in the UK is £250 billion a year. Lost productivity in the economy, in healthcare costs, the impact on people and their lives. That's real cash. This government, this nation doesn't have that money. No nation does. So increasingly, we're going to have to see shifts in the diets that we eat if only to have a healthcare system that will function in the future. The same with the impact of extreme weather. rain, flood, drought, heat on the farming system. Every year we see more and more impact on strategic parts of the world's bread baskets. How hard it is to get the food that we need at the quality and availability we need as well. We can't keep kicking the tin down the road. We need to sort of intervene. So that's the challenge that means we need to move forward. Having said that, then, once we accept that we need to transform, we've got most of the solutions that we need. People have been practicing for 20 or 30 years on better ways of making food, of moving food, of selling food, of preventing waste, of helping people make better choices. The solutions exist, but we haven't had the will or the commitment to implement them because it seemed too difficult. Now that we've got this burning platform of today's food system, we can adopt them. So that gives me hope. And the final thing that gives me hope is that food is so emotional to our lives. We can talk about greener homes, greener cars, greener everything, but food is right at the heart of our identity, our sense of belief, our very lives. And I think once we accept the need to change, we will become very much more involved in choosing better diets and better baskets each week to sort of deliver that diet for us. So I am a pragmatic optimist. I think we recognise the need to change. Now is the time to get on with it and scale the many solutions we have so they become the norm.
Wonderful. So thank you, Mike, for this amazing conversation. It really highlights how deeply connected our food systems are to climate change, biodiversity, and public health. What we choose to eat every day might seem like a small decision, but collectively those choices shape markets, supply chains, and ultimately the future of our planet. Your insights on leadership, business transformation, and the importance of engaging consumers in this transition are incredibly valuable. Transforming the food system is clearly not the responsibility of any single actor, but rather a shared effort across businesses, policymakers, innovators, and individuals. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your perspective with our listeners. And to everyone tuning in, thank you for listening to the Climate Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your network and follow us for more conversation with leaders working at the intersection of climate, sustainability, and innovation. Until next time, take care and have a nice day. Bye-bye.